Hello, I'm Kathy Anderson, and I am the Gifted and Talented Consultant for the state of Kentucky. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, how to identify, and how to provide services. I am joined today by two colleagues. One is Kathy Carver from Hopkins County. She is the GT teacher for the middle and high school. We're also joined by Toddy Adams. She is the Director of Gifted Services for Marshall County. Here are our topics for the day. We will be talking about the state regulations. We will also go over the characteristics of effective leaders. We'll talk about how to identify students. We'll also talk about how to provide gifted service options. Then we'll take a few minutes and talk about best practices and also virtual learning. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Carver.
We are excited to be with you today to talk about one of the most dynamic areas of gifted and talented, and that is leadership and psychosocial skills. So let's take a look at the state regulations together. 704 KAR 3 285 Section 1 says psychosocial or leadership ability means possessing either potential or demonstrated ability to perform at exceptionally high level in social situations. Notice the words potential and demonstrated ability are highlighted on your screen because students are all in varying degrees of their skill set with this. So we're talking elementary children may demonstrate the potential for their leadership skills. And then we're talking high school kids where a lot of them are advanced and really developed. So to perform at exceptionally high level in social and interpersonal qualities such as poise, effective oral and written expression, managerial ability, and the ability or vision to set goals and organize others to successfully reach those goals. Students who are GT in leadership know and realize their shortcomings and where they have gaps, and so they employ other people to help get the job done. So how do we look at the evidences? Okay, so in the next slide, it talks about leadership or psychosocial abilities shall be determined by a variety of informal measures. So one or two pieces of evidence doesn't clearly identify someone as gifted in leadership. It takes several pieces for the picture to emerge clearly. Okay, so let's look at some of these. First, the student must be willing to assume leadership roles in class, so with their peers in class, in a student organization, which can be varied, and in a community activity. And notice in the slide, and is bold because you have to demonstrate in all three areas. You have to be willing and able to execute in all three levels. So evidence of psychosocial or leadership may also include, here's other really important ways that you can collect evidence. You can use sociograms, peer recommendations, behavioral checklists, or observations by faculty, parents, other students, portfolio entries which display leadership qualities, even maybe some awards that they have earned in leadership positions, and offices held by students in extracurricular activities or student government. So what is psychosocial? Psychosocial sometimes appears in our paperwork and in the regs, and people are unclear. Leadership is very cliche at times, and we grasp that. But psychosocial, what does it mean? So let's look. How students interact with others, their thoughts and behaviors. Because how they feel about things is going to come out of their mouth, and you're going to hear even the little ones talk about what they wish they could do for their community or what they want to accomplish, and they talk about their visions and goals. And that is an advanced skill set that you need to be looking for in these students, because not all students see things at such a high level with that many layers. The and in the regulation indicates that students must show willingness to lead in all three areas. So I mentioned it in the last slide. I'm mentioning it in this slide. When you're collecting your evidences, make sure that you can cover all three areas: class, school, and community activity. Okay, what is willingness? Willingness can be defined as being prepared to do something and the potential ability. Having the skill set to have someone say, okay, let's talk about your vision and what you want to accomplish here on this particular project, or tell us what you think you want to accomplish. And so they may have the willingness, but not the opportunity. So we don't want to deny those children the opportunity to be GT leadership when they have all the other qualities, but maybe not the opportunity. So some examples on your slide include the student runs for office, maybe treasurer, not elected, but they've shown the willingness. Like had they been chosen, they would have stepped up. Example of potential ability. The student, when interviewed, states that if given the opportunity, they'd like to organize a food drive or something similar. Those are just examples. In the next slide, we're going to look at, once you've collected all the evidence and you've got everything right there with dates and information, and it's pretty detailed, and you've gone before a committee and you're ready to put it in Infinite Campus and get these children in the program, you're going to pull up Infinite Campus, okay? Before checking documentation of student leadership in community, class, and student, ensure the documentation is there in each area. We have some electronic folders for each child, and we put the detailed information in their electronic folders, and then personnel that help, committee members, teachers that work with them, they may put it in their yellow paper folder. And later we may scan it and put it in the electronic folder too, but we have it in both places depending on how much collection we're doing. So when we go into Infinite Campus, we usually have it right there in front of us. So we're able to click all the necessary evidences. So look at what's highlighted on the screen, because I want to draw your attention to that for the third time in the regs. Documentation of student leadership in community, class, and student organization, or the willingness. And you have to check it first, okay? If those are not there, then perhaps put the kid on a watch list or table them until a later time, until some of that is more clear and that you have it documented. Okay, other things that can be checked here, the example is behavioral observations, peer nominations, and teacher recommendations. There are a variety of others. Some of these appear on other GT identification forms in Infinite Campus, so I'm sure you're familiar with those. But the one that's highlighted is one of our must-dos. We must have that evidence collected. Okay, now we're going to talk about the characteristics of effective leaders. Everything we're going to talk about now is going to be under the umbrella of the regs that we just discussed. We're going to go more in detail. We're going to give you examples. We're going to talk about things that we have done in our districts that maybe you can adapt and change and use in yours. So we're going to start talking about just what are the characteristics we're looking for with these students. One is effective communication. Like, Kathy, when's the next slide coming? Are we still lagging?
No, not on my end.
Okay, so effective communicator. They're able to express what they're thinking and feeling to the teachers, to adults, to other students. They accomplish goals. They set goals. They think what they want to do ahead of time. And not only do they set them, they accomplish them. They initiate activities, plays, arguments. They play devil's advocate. They're very effective decision makers. They know what they want and they try to seize the day. They can follow through on tasks and responsibilities without you reminding them. Once you've put them like in their head or they've come up with it and say, hey, Miss Teacher, can I do so-and-so? They will follow through on their tasks and responsibilities. And it'll be amazing. And you'll say, how old is this child? What training have you had? Effective utilization of human assistance. So they know where their resources are with humans and who can get it done. Oh, I'll talk to the art teacher about whatever it is. They don't mind at all. They understand people. They are a student of studying humans to see what makes them click almost. And they recognize individual personalities and goals, and they put everybody into action together. And it's amazing to watch these leaders. So if you know the characteristics of an effective leader, you know a kid has something, but if you know these characteristics, you'll be like, oh, wow, they're gifted leadership. It'll start to click, and then you can start collecting your evidence. Next slide.
And Kathy, there's another example of effective leaders when you're looking at very little children. There's an activity that I know many of us do where we might have our students line up against a wall in order of age without talking.
I love
And
that.
inevitably, a child, whether they're in the second grade or the fourth grade or the eighth grade, whatever, they'll step forward and just start organizing their peers.
And
So,
they'll model how to do it. They'll be like,
yes, exactly.
and then
Exactly.
everybody follows them.
And we're not saying that that would be a gifted leader, but that's just one of those indications of leadership skills, that they step forward, they're not afraid to do that, they take charge, and they find an effective and efficient way to get to the goal.
And you can start watching them. You
And
can
you
be
can start
like,
watching them. Exactly.
oh, do they do this all the time? Is this just a one-time thing, or is this part of their personality, their makeup? Um, they express themselves well. They adapt to new situations, have a change and have to pivot. They're very good at the pivoting. They can just take it and flow with it.
Absolutely.
They're also natural encouragers of other people, even the adults. Oh, come on, Miss So and so, we can do that because we know how to. And so they almost get the adults pumped up about whatever it is that they are trying to succeed with. So they just have a sense of fun. They really do. They're very vivacious. These leaders, because
Absolutely.
they're selling it. How to identify, Toddy? How do you identify?
Well, I'm going to take what we were just talking about with some of these potential leaders, and it's always good to start with a watch list. And of course, that's what our primary talent pool is. Our primary talent pool are all these precious little children that we're keeping an eye on that have potential for giftedness, or they might be absolutely gifted, and we can see that even if we don't formally identify them in the primary grades. So we want to look at maybe some of the elementary students who don't have all of their social skills yet, and maybe they're a little bit bossy instead of being diplomatic. They might be a little bit aggressive instead of being assertive because they just lack some of their social skills. But there is potential for leading other children and situations in those children. Your watch list can go all the way up through high school. For example, in Marshall County, we have implemented GTRTI for a few years now, and our tier 2 students are those students that have potential for giftedness in any area, and we watch them and we have all of our documentation. And as documentation builds up and gets to 3 pieces, they might be end up being in tier 3, which is, gifted. So you can have a watch system in several ways, whatever works for your district. A lot of districts do have an assessment like Roach rating scale for leadership. Now, this isn't mandated, but it is another piece of evidence if that's what you want to implement. And of course, there's the checklist inventories off the teacher recommendations, there's observations, there's anecdotal evidence, jot downs. So any of this can be used to identify, because the goal is to look at the whole child. We don't just want to look at a bossy child and say that they're a gifted leader. It doesn't work that way. We don't want to look at somebody who has run for student council and won because they're popular and not necessarily a gifted leader. Just because they get elected into office doesn't necessarily mean they're successful in that office as the school year goes on. So we really want to look at the whole child, and this goes with talking to the people who know the child on the identification committee and assessing them in different ways, which is why we use 3 pieces of evidence, if not more.
Yeah, the documentation of effective leadership um, is varied, and it's very anecdotal. So you're going to start gathering it. It's going to be community, class, and student organizations in your school, or not formal organizations. Maybe the kid has some kind of informal group going on. These kids change the weather in your classroom. So make sure you have community, uh, your class, the school, and the community, and that you start getting all of it together. Teacher referrals are a really good way because they work with them every day in the classroom, like their main classroom teacher. I do some training. I do some PLCs with my teachers every year that are going to be with them more than they are with me, and that know the kids in and out. And I say, talk to me about your leaders in your classroom. Who can sway a whole room and sell them on something? And they immediately can start naming names. And it's just a jumping off point when they name names. And then you maybe talk with them one-on-one and say, how strongly do you feel about little Susie or little Billy being recommended? Do you think we could collect evidence? And so you have a conversation with the teacher, especially if you keep hearing the kid's name. Usually the name will be repeated by different teachers and different people. Your PE teacher is an excellent resource because they're in there doing the games and organizing, and those leaders come out and start picking teams or helping the other children get organized, repeating the rules to them. Let me bring them over here. I will. Okay, guys, here's the strategy to win. I mean, it just emerges.
And
Just
coaches.
I started saying, and just like a PE teacher, let's go to the sports team. So when you're in middle, you start with sports teams, really a lot of them more than elementary, and then it expands to even more sports teams in high school. And the coaches can tell you who leads. Um, you can do not they can nominate themselves, which is awesome because I had a running back walk up to me, touch my shoulder in the busy hallway, and say, why am I not GT leadership? He knew my job, he knew what I did, he came straight to me, and I put him on my watch list. Started talking to people, started collecting evidence when things would appear, and my he was amazing with people. The way he was with people, he could get lots done with the adults. He would be talking to the principal and the assistant principal about implementing things. And I'm like, wow, he really is right about that. So never ever discount when they want to nominate themselves. Sociograms, peer surveys, parent questionnaires. Sometimes these kids are so involved in things, and a lot of times you don't see the direct community connection, but the parent will start listing what they've done with their communities. Especially the older the child gets and the more opportunities they have for that community, the parent questionnaire is so vital, I think, because it gives you a whole other layer of the child that maybe you wouldn't see otherwise. Um, and then, of course, student awards or critiques pertaining to leadership service. If they win a leadership award or a service award or something of that nature, it's great to use it in their identification because that's evidence of what they've done.
And Kathy, can I add something to those parent questionnaires just really quick? And I don't know if the slide changed or not to the next slide that is talking about all of these things that you mentioned. But there are some districts who send out or who are hesitant to send out a parent questionnaire because they think that needs to go out to a whole grade level or a whole class or a big part of the student population. But you really don't have to do that if you have a watch list. If you have a watch list and you have this evidence that you start compiling, and you know that this child is a really, really good leadership candidate, you can send out the parent questionnaire then. because I think GT coordinators are hesitant sometimes because they don't want to get the parents' hope up. And then the child end up not being identified as gifted. So you can just be a little bit strategic with your parent questionnaire while not being biased. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, and let me piggyback on that again. We use email a lot, right? So I will email a questionnaire out because it's easy and it's quick and it's blank and there's no information on it yet, kind of thing. And I just make sure you word your email to the parent. Hey, your child is on my radar and is a potential candidate for GT leadership. I'm looking for more information. This is not a guarantee that they will be identified, but it's part of the process. Do you care to complete this? And that way, it's not an automatic. You know, you're not giving them false hopes, and you're not saying that they're automatically in there. And I even sometimes say it has to go before committee, and there's a whole lot of process to it. But I need this information now, if you don't mind. And I get all kinds of stuff. I'm like, wow, they did that. And so it's real eye opener. So definitely be aggressive when you're seeking some of this information because you've got to cover a lot of bases.
Absolutely. And, you know, we have our parent questionnaires on Google Forms. So I basically do the same thing. I send out the link to parents, and it's secure. I've checked with the district. Our Google Forms are secure. So, you know, there are ways to do this and be a little bit strategic and gather information in order to view the whole child when it comes to their leadership capabilities.
Okay, once they're identified as gifted, let's talk about service options. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, so when it comes to gifted service options, remember that when you're identifying, you can't identify if the kids don't have opportunities to show that their leadership skills. Yes, you can look at potential, but when you think about project-based learning, when you think about group work, which we'll hopefully go back through after this time is over, give them opportunities to show their leadership skills, whether it is collaborative. If you are working with a teacher in the classroom, and that way you can see what the kids are doing, or you're consulting with a teacher to provide leadership opportunities. Of course, everything that's listed on this slide, I'm not going to go through all of it. This is straight off of Infinite Campus. But I do want to point out that if you go down the list and look at mentorships, that is one of the best ways for students to be in a leadership position, to help other gifted kids or struggling students in lower grade levels or their grade level. And it really puts them in a leadership role and provides responsibility. And of course, being on this list is research-based. Anytime we have gifted service options for students, we want it to be research-based. So again, here is the list, and whatever you are able to use in your district, you need at least 2, just like the other areas of giftedness. If you have more than 2, that's great.
Yeah, independent study is a really good way also to kids who want to choose what they're studying. Maybe they finish their classwork or their assignments early, and they've got, you know, do not waste that time in class if they're working on an independent study project. That's a fabulous way to help them increase their knowledge. And even if they're doing an independent study on leadership, maybe they're reading a leadership book, you know. So some of those options are just awesome. Very, very key.
And when it comes to independent study, if the teachers are pre-assessing and the students are already indicating mastery of the content being taught, they may not have to do that lesson, and they can be doing independent study instead, because we always want to do different work when it comes to differentiation and not extra work. So there are a lot of options depending on what your district employs.
So that may be planning they're planning a project, or they're planning the implementation of a service. You just never know what that's going to look like. So now
Right.
we're going to talk about enrichment. We're going to pull enrichment services off that page, and now we're going to talk about it during the school day. So kids are involved in lots of things, and lots of GT budgets are very, trim. So in our district, we look for ways, instead of reinventing the wheel, we try to pick things that are going on and piggyback and get our leadership GT kids involved. Once they're identified, now we need to hone those skills, develop them, practice. And so here are some enrichment services during the school day. You could do tech teams. I consulted Callaway County today to find out about leadership tomorrow, and I looked at a schedule, and it looks an awful lot like our own Junior Leadership Academy. So I grouped those two together here, and basically it's ambassadors and kids from the schools that go out and go like on site, and they learn about their area, their community. They learn about the healthcare system. They learn about the government, how it works. They go see it with their own eyes, talk to these officials and these business leaders with their own eyes and ears, and they learn so much. And then they are dressing up to fit their environments. They are using their manners and and I'm speaking like they're small children, but in our leadership academy, we have from fifth all the way through seniors in high school. And then we watch leaders among the leaders develop. And so the older kids mentor the younger kids, showing them and modeling that behavior. So the leadership, different, you can call it different things, but it's a pull out type program that allows the kids to see outside the classroom leadership, people in leadership roles. Class officer, club officer, project chair. You might be in beta club and they put you in charge of fundraising. What an awesome way to use your leadership GT skills and find out where you're weak and improve that too. Because a lot of these adults usually manipulate and have to be in charge of, but you put your GT kid in there, and sometimes they can even be more effective than the adults because they have less things to juggle. Marshall County has leadership classes. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. We have a leadership class that one semester has freshmen and sophomore in it, and the other semester has junior and seniors. Right now in Marshall County, the juniors and seniors are in the leadership class. I received an email from them this morning asking me if they can be pen pals to students at one of the elementary schools. So I started asking my questions. Is this a paper and pencil thing that we have to quarantine the papers as they go back and forth? Is it digital? Are you going to be using Marshall County student email addresses? What grade level are you looking at? Is this for gifted students, or is it for all levels of students? And boy, those kids just started answering my questions. There's a particular school that they want to work with. I contacted the principal and started giving contact information back to the leadership class. I tell you this scenario to let you see that this is all student led. The students came up with the idea. They came to a person who had the information, and now they're going to take over. They're going to set this all up. They're going to be looking at standards, elementary school standards, where letter writing and formatting comes in, and they're going to start working with students. That is just one example of the many things the leadership students do, whether it's within the leadership class at Marshall County High School, within the district, or within the community, or globally. And I'm going to very quickly touch on We Schools down there at the bottom, because We Schools is our conduit to global service. We're not doing it right now because of COVID, but We Schools is a very reputable organization that helps with people, for example, in the Amazon rainforest, just different parts of the world where people are struggling, and the students are able to fundraise and get this window outside of their own small world, look at another part of what's going on this planet, and help them. So that class, whether they're a leader in the classroom, the school, the district, the community, or globally, they actually utilize their leadership skills to get things done. It's not really about telling them about leadership, it's about them being leaders. And we're there to help.
Let's talk about those transferable skills. The student that got a hold of you and asked if they could do it learned a great deal. So the next time that they present an idea, they're probably going to be more prepared, and they're going to have all of the details. You with me? Because you turned
Absolutely.
around. Yes. So you taught them. Now you may never see it, but some employer somewhere is going to be super impressed and very thankful that they had this experience in school.
And
And
learn to ask maybe more questions than they initially, things might be more complicated than they initially thought. And this is a safe place to find those things out. It's also a safe place to stumble and fall, pick yourself back up, and learn effective communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, creative thinking. The thing is, it's safe, and we need that for our students.
And leadership kids have a lot of that. They may not, they may be weaker in some areas and need to work on it. So sometimes what you use for evidence, you also use as a service, because they're not strong in everything they need to be strong in. So some enrichment examples for virtually, like we created a Google Classroom and we invited the GT kids in it. And then I just offer things that they can do where they're safe. Okay. So we applied to get with the Louisville Ballet to get the Nutcracker free. Now they opened it up for just so many schools, and then they had to start charging. But we jumped on it and got in by the deadline and made our plea and were chosen. So we offered to our GT kids the Louisville Ballet. The Lexington Children's Theater has some, you just Google that on the website. There's some virtual opportunities there. Leaders love the Idea Festival at WKU. It's $10 a kid. It's February 17th. It's online. It's 3 hours on a Wednesday morning. And leaders can learn so much from other people who have attempted to do things and failed. And the lineup, I think there's 4 people that are going to talk to them. One of them is from a TV show. And I just know that the kids I have signed up are excited. We also do a press point, a journal of creativity. The kids can safely submit things through a Google form. There goes Google again. A Google form where they submit black and white drawings, colored drawings, poetry, song lyrics, anything that they've done that's original. And by the end of the school year, we've published a book. And it's really super neat this to watch and to watch the leadership of the kids who participate. The stock market game, leaders can participate in that. That's a great virtual. It's free this spring, teachers. Starts January 25th. You want to get your kids registered. And I do some organizational skills, because a lot of times GT kids don't have they're not equipped with all of the note taking and how to organize their day to utilize it successfully, optimally. So leaders have to learn to juggle that stuff too. So there's nice little journals and to-do lists and things that I do with them on the Google Classroom. So what I'm trying to say is, you can create your own little activities, or you can look what's offered statewide or nationally, and you have to weigh the costs of some of it, and some of it's free. You just have to dig. But there's lots of enrichment services that are virtual to keep the children safe. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about optional extracurricular activities and offerings, maybe not during the school day, but closely tied. Think about academic team practice right after school. Captains and other leadership roles on teams. Maybe you're the defense or the offense leader. Maybe you're in charge of the Kentucky Youth Association for the school, and you all meet after school. A lot of great academic content goes on. Lots of learning leadership roles. Have to get up and present bills at some of these CUNA and KYA things. Young women lead, and then all the clubs have leadership. Future Farmers of America, which wants to be referred to as FFA now. They've kind of dropped the farmers from it because they're trying to be more inclusive to everybody, not just one occupational field. Then you have FBLA, which is Future Business Leaders of America, Beta Club, Key Club. I mean, the list goes on, but there's all leadership roles in these clubs that you can utilize with your GT leadership and should. I always try to find my GT leadership kids and say, here's what's happening next in high school, and you need to take advantage of it because it's going to improve yourself. And they're like, oh, yeah. And then they start picking out which club they want to join. And then they eventually end up, they always do, they end up leading the club, whether, they intended to at the beginning or not. So that's a good thing. Next slide.
Okay, we're going to sort of sum up what we've been talking about with best practices. So this is actually going to be a little bit of a review. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But this is so important to know because the regulations give districts a lot of leeway, but that doesn't mean you can just sort of do anything you want within compliance. You want to stick to best practices because we always want to do what's best for kids. So in every area of giftedness, the key word for identification is opportunities. We are never going to see how the students shine if they lack opportunities to shine in the different areas of giftedness. So when it comes to leadership, we want to provide opportunities for leadership development, whether it's in the classroom, in the school, in the community, globally, because we want to follow those regulations. The best way to do this is to stay in communication with the teachers. Stay in communication with the parents. If you have like a local CAGE chapter, or if you have Google Classrooms or your distribution list on your emails, you just want to provide opportunities for our leaders to be developed. And if the kids just cannot come through, and if they don't show those characteristics of giftedness, then you also have evidence for kids on your watch list that they're actually not leaders. So this works in different ways. Again, you want to have that watch list, whether it's a tiered system of interventions or a sticky note on your computer, however it is that works for you. That's what you want to do to watch these the students. Of course, we have our teacher recommendations that has the checklist inventory on it, and do not just limit that to the teachers. If there are guidance counselors who witness what's going on in the cafeteria or what's going on in the hallways, or administrators, coaches, professionals, any responsible adults that can verify those gifted behaviors in whatever area, not just leadership, we want to utilize the adults around us to gather information on gifted characteristics. And just like any area of giftedness, we need 3 valid pieces of evidence, and they have to be documented. Now, remember, 3 pieces of evidence does not mean automatic acceptance into the gifted program. 3 pieces of evidence means they go before the committee who is going to discuss the whole child. Now, you might say, what's a valid piece of evidence? Well, we have our lists on Infinite Campus. That's one way to look at it. But let's use a teacher recommendation, for example. If a teacher emails you and says, I would like to recommend David for gifted program and leadership, and that's all that it says, that's probably not a valid teacher recommendation. You would want to email back and say, would you please provide some evidence on his leadership characteristics or his qualities? And when the teacher emails back and has a couple of paragraphs, you now have anecdotal documentation. So you have to use your teacher sense about what is valid. And if it really doesn't tell you anything about the child, that might not be something that you want to use. So that's part of best practices, using valid documentation. You can go to the next slide. Remember that service options must be considered according to interest, strengths, and needs of gifted learners. And remember too that for a special needs student, for example, their needs might be their deficiencies. For gifted students, their needs are their strengths. So we want to service these children for their strengths and any needs that they might have. Sometimes when a child has a very, very high IQ, they may not be the most socially aware students, just as an example. That might be a need. Remember that you can serve service options within the regulations that your district provides, but those gifted needs always have to be taken into consideration. So if you're used to going on to Infinite Campus and just clicking what you know your district has, you're in compliance, but that may not be exactly what that child needs. If differentiation is not occurring in the classroom, then you might want to set up an independent study instead of differentiation. So it's about effective communication with administrators, with teachers, and with gifted services to figure out what is best for the child and not just choosing things that keep you in compliance with the Kentucky Department of Education. We know that at least 2 service options must be implemented, but remember, it's at least. If there are more service options that are provided by your district, then do it. And then remember too that leadership roles include those very, very important 21st century skills. We want to foster effective communication and collaboration. We want kids to be creative and critical thinkers. We want them to be able to problem solve. We want them to have information literacy and civic literacy. Just remember that if you can foster these skills in your leadership students and all gifted students, then they are more apt to be successful in a university setting, in a military setting, in a job setting when they leave our school districts.
Yes, so we're planting seeds that we might not see develop, but we know that the more opportunities you give them, the more chances they're going to encounter something that they'll always remember and utilize it. Okay, now we're going to talk about virtual learning resources. Okay, the State Department has a guidance on safety expectations and best practices, and you are very well aware of them at this point in the game. Surely you know about 6 feet apart, keep your social distance, temperature checks, and masking up. So the state has given a guidance document that you can click on and you can view. And then there's some, every district does it different. Some are hybrid, some are everybody full time, but we're reopening schools after the latest spike. And so we have to make sure we draw attention to practicing our services, our targeted services safely. Okay, next slide. So we're going to talk about some examples of virtual learning, actual little things that you can do while you're on the computer trying to teach your kiddos. So Angela Thompson from McLean County sent this in. She said, we do brain breaks. The leadership GT kids come up with the breaks, what activity during the Zoom or during whatever your software is that you're using. But they come up with brain breaks, so they stop because you all know how tiresome you can get on a Zoom call. So they stop and they have an activity with the kids. The GT kids come up with it, the leadership, and they conduct it, and they keep the rules, whatever the game is. And so they're responsible for everything, planning, implementing, and bringing it to a close so the instruction continues. Whether the kids get up out of their seat or whatever, it helps them take a break from information overload. And you all know what that feels like. So the kids are getting it a lot. So this is awesome. And I just want to say that Angela was very nice to tell us what she had come up with. And so we're grateful for that because it's good. Key Club did some video intros. The officers did little introduction videos of themselves telling them and then posted it so that everybody in the Key Club Google Classroom could go in, and all the members, and I think they have about 100, and all clubs vary, but especially if you have a big club and you're trying to get to know each other and it's so hard, they can go watch the video intros and see a little bit about them, and then they feel a little bit warmer to them to be able to reach out to these officers and talk to them about activities and things. Okay, so video intros are really great. And one of the last couple I want to talk about, Salvation Army bell ringing was a great community service over Christmas. The kids were outside, had their masks on, they stayed 6 feet apart, they rang bells, and people donated to the Salvation Army so they could help those in need. Great example of a GT leadership endeavor. And then virtual club conferences. We talked about all these clubs. All of them are holding their leadership. They even call it like Future Business Leaders of America as their Region 1 or Region 2 or whatever part of the state you're in. They call them leadership. I'm going blank. Leadership, not convention, but they hold them. And so because of COVID, they've all gone online. And I talked to one sponsor from Lyon County, and she said, "Are you kidding? I didn't have to pay for buses. They got to interact with people online, and because they've been at home so long, and it was the best ever. And our kids racked up the trophies. So that's a really great opportunity for GT leadership to be, and especially a regional office. That's even more stress and transferable skills they can learn. Stress is good in some ways, but regional and state offices, great venues for the GT leadership kids. And I think that's about all we have. Kathy Anderson's going to wrap it up.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Toddy and to Kathy for giving us some really great best practices and examples of how you can identify leadership students. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, especially if they have to do with any of the regulations that were talked about today. As you can see, here's our contact information, and thank you again for watching.